Hey everybody, Vader Saber 1984 here. Also known as the man without a fan. Today we are doing something completely different. We are talking about video games. And we're only going to stick with older games, more along lines of my generation, 80s, 90s, even up to the 2000s. So we're going to talk about the greatest games in as fast as possible that I can give you. All right. So I've got a ton of games, ton of systems, but right now we're going to only specify on regular Nintendo and Perfect Dark. Now, if it comes to regular NES, regular Nintendo, my top five are going to be Double Dragon 2, Super Contra, Sky Kid, Deja Vu, and gotta go with Zelda. Those are my top five for NES. I mean, you've got a couple callbacks, couple good ones like Wrestlemania, uh, uh, Simulator Baseball 1000, Spider Man versus a Sinister Six. Man, I could go on and on about that, but just a couple examples. However, we've got, let's say, my thing of wrestling video games and Nintendo 64 games. Because I am a huge wrestling fan, and Nintendo 64 was just that time where, it was really good graphics and really good games. The controller was pretty crappy, and it was slow, and you had to have a cartridge, and sometimes the cartridge would get overloaded and you didn't like it. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off before the wrestling games, and I will judge the wrestling games from best to worst after I do the order in which they came. So, my favorite video game as a younger man in the late 90s 2000s for Nintendo 64 was Perfect Dark. I loved it. Okay, it was pretty much an offshoot of 007. Really, really good game. The story mode was nowhere near as good as 007. Nowhere near. They tried to add a couple features of kind of a home wandering scenario where you could walk around and talk to people or whatever. They were pushing more than what they could really, really give you for awesomeness, but they tried. It was better than 007 only because you had a little bit more freedom. You had a little more of the character basis that you could create or change up. I guess you might say you can't create them, but you could swap things out a little bit differently. You could have bots, and you could actually have a multiplayer where you could assign the weapons, what you're going to have, and the bots and the difficulty that you're going to play. So, my number one video game of all time outside of wrestling is definitely Perfect Dark when it comes to the Nintendo 64. Love this game. Out of a five, I give it a 4.5. Okay, for a Nintendo 64 game, it was really good, just for all around. You can play it for hours and hours and hours, and enjoy it, no matter what. Now, The next 4 games that we're going to cover is going to be WCW versus NWO World Tour, the original first wrestling game that came out on Nintendo 64. Its predecessor, WCW NWO Revenge, and then the WWF versions that came out to, try and battle that. Same maker, THQ, which was Wrestlemania 2000 and No Mercy. Okay, so we've got 2 WCW games and 2 WWF games. After that, they came out with a whole... WCW went out of their mind. The predecessor WWF games were like Warzone and Attitude and stuff like that. They were built for more of a PlayStation console, and it wasn't. It didn't match up. I mean, the graphics were hokey. The hands were, they looked like points. When they would punch you, it looked like they were stabbing you in the face with a a chop. It just, there were things that they could really fix. But that's because it was built on another console, and things were coming to be better. But we're going to go ahead and start with, and then I'll rate them. We'll start with the original WCW versus NWO World Tour. This was the first wrestling game on Nintendo 64 that I ever played. I was in my one of my good friend Caleb's house for his birthday, and it just came out, and we stayed up maybe 8-9 hours wee early in the morning playing this game, just having fun, trying to do the battle royal, and it was so much fun. You had great wrestlers in there. They weren't as defined or singled out by their abilities. It was more along the lines of their moveset, their faction, and who you really wanted to be as a wrestler playing this game. My favorite wrestler of all time was Sting, and in this game, he was the only one that could run from corner to corner in the ring and hop over the turnbuckle outside of the ring and land on somebody if you had somebody there. The only person. And I was just like, man, this is a great game. They had everybody from, the Giant. I could go on forever. Steven Regal, Diamond Dallas Page, Six, Eric Bischoff, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. I mean, they had a really good line up of people. And the only one, might I add, that had Ric Flair. Ric Flair was on there. Out of that game, 1 out of 5, out of everything that I've played, I am still going to give that game, I'm going to give it a solid 4. So good. The only thing is, it was kind of slow. It was their first one that came out. There was no storyline. It was just kind of arcade, which was good, but it was just battle. No story, and honestly, just that's the only thing that the graphics were brand new. So it was still kind of square and bite. So we're going to put that right there. Still got a 4. Next one up, WCW versus NWO Revenge. THQ still did it. I gotta say, with the Attitude Era, with the With the Monday Night Wars, this was the game. It does not matter. You could pick anybody from any roster and just play it. It was a good game. It was very limited on what you could do. What I do respect about this game is it gave you a point system to where you could try and beat people's scores, kind of like an arcade game. Really enjoyed that. However, you cannot beat the creator of the game, or I have not been able to, when it comes to certain matches, what have you. The tag team, the cruiserweight, the heavyweight. What else was there? Oh, good lord! It's been a little bit since I played it, but there were some things in there that you were just like, "There's no way. How are these points coming?" And this is the only game out of these four that actually had a scoring system and a point system that would be remembered, and you could try and beat it. So, really love that game. Whether you're Raven, Goldberg, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Chris Benoit, the man, or something even off of another Japanese. They called it, fake characters, but it was off of actual people. But you could pick anybody out of there, and it was really good. You could pick different venues. Had the battle royal in there. So all in all, I give this game a I'm going to give it a 4.25. Okay. Really love this game. No storyline whatsoever. Playing for the belt. You actually get to see the belt, which was great. However, it did have its flaws. Every game does. Next up, we're going to go with Wrestlemania 2000, the WWF brand, okay? It is the first N64 game that I knew of, other than Turok. Well, no, Turok was almost immature, but came out with a teen rating. Everything else was either everybody or kids and adults. Perfect Dark was a mature. It came a lot later, and if you know that game, it's only because you're shooting people, and that's a bad thing in real life. But anywho, as far as wrestling goes, WWF, it is the exact same thing as WCW versus Nwo Revenge, with only one thing added to it. Create your own belt and create your own wrestler. Well, excuse me, two things. Create your own belt, create your own wrestler. This was the game to get. Matter of fact, my original game was stolen from me by a buddy of mine, because he said, man, I haven't got to play it. My parents, yada, yada, yada. I said, well, I'm working on it. Tell you what, you loan me one of yours, I'll loan you one of mine. He said, okay. Brought it to him. Oh man, I forgot it, but I'll bring it to you. A couple weeks later, never saw him again. He disappeared, got shipped out. I don't know what happened. Probably the hardest wrestling game ever. Hardest. Because whether you were on easy mode, medium, or hard, it doesn't matter. If you are in the cage match with Mankind or Kane or The Undertaker, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're in story mode and you're playing those guys, you can't win. Unless by a sheer shot of luck, you get lucky. It is the hardest wrestling game of its time. WrestleMania 2000 was really good. It brought out the Hardy Boys. It had Ken Shamrock. It had all the greats. Stone Cold, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Vince McMahon, had China in there, had the whole DX crew. It was a really good game, had great characters. However, the characters' individuality and their ranking system, I guess you might say, was kind of less. The storyline was almost like WCW Nwo Revenge, but they did have cutscenes in it. So they were trying. This is right when PlayStation came out with SmackDown. Well, they almost came out with SmackDown, but they were in the works for it. So WrestleMania 2000, I got to give this a 4.5. Okay, I really do. It was a great game. Had a lot of difficulty to it. Doesn't matter what level you played on. Hours and hours and hours. You could create your own titles, fight for your own titles, create your own tournaments or whatever. Really, really awesome. Gave you a little bit more than the previous other two wrestling games. 4.5. WrestleMania 2000, one of my favorites. Lastly, No Mercy. WWF No Mercy. This game came out right, almost exactly right, as the same point that SmackDown came out with. Same creators, two different consoles, of course, one PlayStation, one 64. However, this one gave you everything that the previous three had. Create your own wrestlers, good storylines, great wrestlers, but threw it all into one good WWF where you had even ladders and table matches and you had storylines. The first wrestling game for Nintendo 64 to have a storyline, multiple storylines. Very long, lots of hours, creating your own characters, creating your own moves. Awesome. This right here is probably, I'm going to give it a 4.9. Probably one of my favorite Nintendo 64 games other than 2000 and Perfect Dark. But when it comes to wrestling, this was what it was. There's been times, even in the past, where I will take my cartridge to people who have called me out and said, I will beat you with any character. Okay. I'll be there soon. And guess what? I've never been beaten. Not happening. So, that's my rundown of all 5 games, just of my favorites. 4 wrestling games. It was supposed to be particularly wrestling, but Perfect Dark's just got to be in there, honestly. But WCW World Tour, Revenge, WWF 2000, WrestleMania, respect, and No Mercy. Other than that, Perfect Dark. 5 wonderful games for the Nintendo 64 that everybody should have in their collection. Highly recommended. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, give me a comment, share. If you'd like to hear anything else, please let me know. Vader Saber 1984, the man without a fan. Just want to say thank you for watching, and what is your favorite Nintendo 64 game? And why?